So our questions here, Mayor Barrett, are generated from viewers on our Facebook page. We want to give it a chance through our series that we call The Pulse, a chance for viewers, voters, to bring their questions straight to you. And our first question comes from Kay Evans. She lives in Westfield, and she asks, how do you think, after all this, how do you think you can bring the state back together?
Well, I had the same question asked to me when I was elected mayor in 2004, because it was a very divided election in 2004. And there were bad feelings. There were bitter feelings after it ended. And I had a lot of people saying, you're never going to be able to bring the city back together. And I made it my personal goal to bring the city back together. And I even had some of my staff members who said, you're spending too much of your time trying to work with people who were against you. But I said, I think I should be the mayor of the whole city, not just of the people who voted for me. Fast forward from 2004 to 2008, I was reelected with 79% of the vote. And that happened, I believe, because I went about this in a way to try to have everybody included. And I understand that this is a partisan world here. I served in the legislature, I served in Congress when Newt Gingrich was speaker, and everybody was at each other's throat. So I'm not Pollyanna walking into this. But I really do think there's a place for people who want to work with other people. And that's what I'm going to try to do.
And after this election, we're going to have another very political environment leading up to the presidential election. As you mentioned, you're fully aware of the political environment that's sure to follow. Robin Miller of Sauk City asks a question, kind of following up to that question we just asked. Give some examples maybe of how you can begin to repair our state, is what she asks, or I guess he asks. I'm not sure if Robin Miller of Sauk City asks, give some examples of how you can repair the state. And like we mentioned, that's going to be leading up to the presidential election if you're the governor. And
well, I've already tried, and when I tried it, maybe even with some success. I'm doing these what I call neighbor to neighbor gatherings around the state, where I ask neighbors to bring in their neighbors and sit down and talk, because we really do have a situation now where, because of how split the state is, neighbors don't want to talk to neighbors about politics, and relatives don't even want to talk to relatives about politics. We've got to change that. We've got to change that. So I was up in Schofield, just outside of Wausau, for one of these neighbor to neighbor, and as I was walking up the street, there were some protesters there. There were some people holding I Stand With Scott Walker signs, probably 8 to 10 of them. And of course, everybody was nervous, and they said, do you want to walk in the back way? And I said, no, well, let me go talk to them. Let me go talk to them. And I went, and the funniest part, and I hope it was just the funny part, was there was one guy, a very old guy, and he's holding the sign, and I sort of reached out to him, and he saw it was me, and he takes the sign, and he starts to hit me with it. No, I'm here to say hello. And so I shook hands with all of them. You can go to my Facebook. You'll see me standing there with 7 or 8 Walker supporters with their signs, and they're smiling.
I did see the pictures on Facebook already. It's amazing how those pictures go around the world so quick. All right, next question comes from Christine Henker in Sun Prairie, and it's a very point-blank question. Do you plan on, and you have commented on this before, but do you plan on restoring bargaining rights for public union workers?
The answer is yes, and I'll take a multifaceted approach. I think there's different vehicles to do it, but the answer is yes.
And how will that, we don't know what the makeup will be of the legislature at this point. I think technically we got some recall elections in the Senate as well. What will be the hurdles for that?
Well, I think obviously the election, the gubernatorial election, is going to send a strong message to the state, and I believe that what's going to happen is that I'm going to win, and there will be Republicans in the Assembly who had voted for this who are going to think, well, now the people of the state have spoken, and it is important to restore these organizing rights and these bargaining rights, and I think we can do it.
Question number 4 from Joe Phobes in Madison says, what steps would you have taken to balance the budget differently than what Governor Walker has done since taking office?
Well, budgets are all about priorities, and as a mayor of Milwaukee, I've had 8 balanced budgets in a row. And there I've set my priority as public safety, because as a mayor, particularly in a large city, that's a major concern. As governor, my priority would be education. So I will, going forward, I will focus on education. Looking backward, what he did initially was he dug the hole deeper when he gave all those corporate tax cuts, and those tax cuts that benefited primarily wealthy people, or where wealthy people benefited a lot. And to me, when you're in a hole, you don't dig the hole deeper before trying to get out of the hole. So we're going to take a look at all those and see whether they're tied to job creation, because I want any tax incentives to be actually tied to job creation in the state of Wisconsin.
And they said balance the budget differently. Governor Walker touts balancing a $3 billion deficit. are handling that. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, the last legislative fiscal report said it was in deficit. Now, he did the same thing he tried to do with the jobs numbers, where if he doesn't like a nonpartisan objective analysis of something, poof, he pulls a rabbit out of his hat that he's got a new set of numbers, a brand new set of numbers, 20 days before the election or 30 days before the election. And so I would beg to differ that he has balanced the budget.
Next question comes from Darren Crispin in Madison, and he says, how do you propose to get people back to work? And it's kind of a two-part question. And also, cut back on taxes, and I think he says especially property taxes. So I think what he's saying here is, how do you get people back to work, and how do you hold the line on property taxes?
Well, let me talk about jobs first, because I think when Scott Walker started this ideological civil war, and he talked about how he wanted to divide and conquer the state, and he succeeded in dividing the state. I think even his opponent would agree that he succeeded maybe beyond his wildest dreams in dividing the state, which I think is the problem. Because if you've got this state that's at each other's throat, that it's difficult then to achieve other goals. And I find it somewhat ironic that he said, well, the reason that his job performance is so bad is because the state's divided. And my reaction was, yeah, but you started it. You started the divide. So it's a little difficult to blame the divisions in the state for the loss of jobs when you're the one who instigated the division. But it really gets to the serious issue, and that is he took his eye off the prize. The prize was, how do we create jobs? And it was like a fork in a road. And he could have done what he said he was going to do as a candidate in 2010, and that is to work to create 250,000 jobs. Or he could go the route he chose, the divide and conquer route. And as a result of that, we lost a whole year of job growth in this state. And that's probably 60,000 jobs if we had matched what the national growth had been in jobs. So I'm not going to travel the country giving fundraising speeches so I can be the rock star of the far right or the far left. I'm going to stay here and focus on creating jobs in Wisconsin, because I think that that's the major concern.
And the second part was, how do you hold the line on property taxes?
Well, I think what you'll see is you're going to see that the payments that people are making for their health care and pensions, those are going to remain. And I think that part of the debate's done. Once you had those labor leaders acknowledge that their members would pay, that part of the debate was done. And I think that's going to go a long way in controlling property taxes in the state.
Okay. Final viewer question. It comes from Tim Durr. He's in Black Earth, and he has some concerns, I think, about Milwaukee. Unemployment numbers, public schools, and tax record. He asks, are those three things, unemployment, public schools situation, and the taxes in Milwaukee, is that a fair representation of your capabilities?
Well, it's a fair representation of Scott Walker's commercial, that's for sure. It comes right out of Scott Walker's commercial, and I'm happy to address all three of them. What's interesting about the unemployment is he says unemployment under Tom Barrett has gone up 28%. What he doesn't say is that during the first 7 years I was mayor, he was a county executive in Milwaukee. And while he was county executive, during the 8+ years he was county executive, unemployment went up 34%. Now, he's not going to put that in his commercial, but it certainly is factually true. So you've got that. He knows as well as I do, I don't run the schools, so he's just going to try to tire me with the schools. And in terms of spending, my spending, or the city's spending, was very comparable to the spending that went up as under him as county executive. Very, very comparable. The difference was he would make the members of the county board do the dirty work, and I don't like to play tricks and paint other people in the corner and try to make them look bad. I'll stand up for what I believe in.
I'm just going to finish with two quick questions of my own. It's been 19 months since the first election. How is Tom Barrett different than you were? I mean, is it a different approach to how you want to run? Are you personally just different? Just what
I would say there's several things are different. One, I think the population is different, and I think people have a better understanding of who Scott Walker is. And what I find are the crowds are much more invigorated, which gives me energy, frankly. I mean, you sort of feed off the crowds. And there are certain things that I really am angry about. I'm angry about how he is viewing this state as his way to make a national name for himself. And this goes back to the Milwaukee question. You've got a former county executive of Milwaukee who left 18 months ago. And in his acceptance speech on primary night, he was willing to trash Milwaukee and say, we don't want Wisconsin to be like Milwaukee. And I thought, what kind of loyalty does that show to the community that you led 18 months ago? And I thought, I think you'd do the same thing in a heartbeat. And you'd trash Wisconsin if it would serve your political purposes. And I think that the issue of loyalty and honesty, I think those are relevant issues as well.
My last question would be, how do you envision, let's say you're the next governor of Wisconsin, how do you envision those first days, first couple of weeks in office?
Well, reaching out to leaders throughout state government, both parties, and I think local leaders, and trying to start bringing the whole state together, and maybe having a gigantic sheep's head game or something, and bring the whole state, invite the whole state for sheep's head game. But I think it's bringing the state back together.
Mayor Barrett, thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Yep.